So Kim, I'll let you kick this off.
Amazing. Okay, family business. Tell me about all the challenges. We can talk all night if you want.
Do you want to? You've got the mic.
Alrighty. I suppose just the dynamic of being in a family is challenging a lot of the time. And as kind of I mentioned before, you probably say things and much more emotive with family. So where you might be a little more restrained in a boardroom scenario, you definitely don't hold back when it's family, and they do the same to you. So I think that's pretty hard as well because sometimes you need a moderator or somebody to make sure that you get to the end of the meeting, because otherwise you just go around in circles.
You can use that one actually. Pass that.
Okay. For me, mine is a bit of a silly one, but if you're working with a baby boomer, they have a very different work mentality, and we're more around balance, and if you're balanced, then you're going to be able to work really efficiently and get it done. You don't need to sit at the desk, like physically at the desk, from 8 until 6 p.m. And so I'm one that I'll get my best work done or best thinking done when I'm going for a run, or or working out of a cafe or whatever it is. So the different mentality where if your parents set the tone of what is okay and what isn't, and then having to conform to that was annoying. Because I knew how to get the best out of myself, but I still had to conform to what and I guess that's a culture. And it wasn't until after I sold the business, and you can sort of have a lot more fun, and you don't have to be as conservative with the things that you do. So yeah, it's a silly one, but I feel like I can enjoy myself a little bit more rather than being so serious in the family business.
Now, you both also mentioned that one of the benefits of being in a family business is you're learning. You have someone, it's almost like a mentor who teaches you and shows you the ropes. What are some of the things that you've learned which you attribute to that environment?
For me, it was, I would always have, Dad would be someone that would sort of pull me back on things. So I'd be like, we're doing this, and I'm going to say this, and a lot of it's dumb. And he would be that check-in that was more conservative, to be like, how about this, or have you thought about this, in a really gentle way. And so that sort of ease and grace in learning and being in the business was a really big learning curve for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Georgia on that one, especially when you're kind of fairly new to it all, I think, and you think that you'll probably bring something fairly new and that there's lots of things that could be done better, but maybe you don't really know that much about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I think as well, just in terms of kind of the finance of the company and where money comes from and how cash flow works, and just basic things like that, where you think you probably have it fairly well under control because you have a degree and you learnt it, but in real life it's pretty different. And I think they're pretty open and transparent about how it all works and how much things cost and how to make it successful for the long term, not to kind of blow it all pretty quickly. So
I'll just follow up on that one. So talking about the data, and obviously you're quite entrenched in the numbers, and that's something that you're very passionate about. So we can talk about that in a second as well. But Penelope, obviously you've maybe had to pick that up as you've gone along. Is the data something that you're comfortable with and to make business decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely something that I've learnt a lot about over quite a long period of time, I think, as well, and how it relates specifically to what we do and the business and the kind of golf economy, I think, as a whole. But it's very important.
And then for you then, I'd say, everything that you do is based around the numbers. Can you give any advice to the people that maybe aren't so into the numbers?
As in getting confident with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't know your numbers, then you don't know your business. When I was writing, I wrote this business plan, which business plans aren't a thing anymore, but I actually did have this big, thick business plan, which changed straight away as we went. Actually, that's not true, but a lot of it changed. There was a couple of, like, the Asian strategy stayed the same. But my uncle wrote the business model for it. And so, you know, P&L and a balance sheet is one thing, but actually modelling the business and having a working model so that when something changes, and I guess that it really is a business plan. And so when something changes, you can change the inputs, whether you've got more staff or one of the expenses has gone up, like the seals on my wine glasses. The supplier went out of business and we had to buy them from somewhere else, and so they were more expensive. And so having a model that I then was tinkering around with in the early days gave me a really good grasp on the business, and then I could make decisions accordingly. And when I was raising money, and if you can't answer straight away on whatever they're asking for around the numbers, it makes you look really reckless, and it's a real rookie thing. So anyone that is raising money, you just have to, you need to know your numbers, because it will be embarrassing, and you definitely won't get the money out of that party either.
Mm-hmm. Any embarrassing moments for you in that?
Oh, I've blanked them all out. I don't even know how I raised money at the start, to be honest. I don't know what I was pitching. I did have this really good business model, and I had this plan, and I was like, nothing was getting in my way. I was going to make this business successful, and I think that's what really they invested in, was just like, she's crazy. I feel like she's going to make it happen. But embarrassing moments. You know what was funny? I went through something called Springboard, which is a female sort of accelerator program, but it's when you're sort of wanting to scale up and really give the business a belting. It was really funny. So there was, I'm really good friends, some of my best girlfriends I met in that program. And so one had a biotech company that's now listed, and a couple of SaaS companies. Really, really interesting businesses. But we never knew how to speak about ourselves and say, I am the founder of this business, and this is what I'm really good at, and this is why it's going to be successful. Like, we're really bad at talking about ourselves. We would sort of talk about the business at arm's length. And so it was really funny that none of us were able to speak about ourselves confidently. So that was like, I don't think of myself that way, but it's funny that I would articulate that in public, and particularly on stage on a really important platform when I'm, you know, raising money for my business. So that was a pretty big one.
Mm-hmm. And that's evolved now? You're comfortable with that?
Well, I mean, now the more I know, the more I know how little I know, and so I generally keep my mouth shut about I should under promise, over deliver. Ideally, that's the motto now. Yeah.
Awesome. Should we put it out to the audience? You got another question?
I have one more question, and maybe we can throw it out. One thing, this is a question for both, but one thing that Georgia did say, which stuck with me, is that there are no lines in family businesses. I'm not sure why it jumped out at me, but maybe could you share a bit more about what you meant? Mm-hmm. Both.
Do you want to go? I feel like I've had the mic for too long. No lines is that it's like, if that job doesn't get done, then the business can fall over and it's your fault. So like, it's sort of, for me, you've got this responsibility and no one else is going to do it. And so you've just got to fill in the gaps, and it's that thing that Penny was talking about, where you've got this emotional investment, because it's your future, it's your family's future, and it's not just like, if you have a job and you're getting paid a certain amount and your boss asks you to do something, you know, sometimes you could sit there and be like, you know what, I don't really like this job, I'm happy to risk it today, I'm going to leave at 3 and I'm not going to do that thing. And so then you're like, it's a very calculated thing that you're burning at that point, or risking. Where in a family business, it's not just pissing your boss off. Like, the whole family can get involved, and there's like a lot of other repercussions that generally you don't want to touch. What's your view, Penny?
Yeah, absolutely. Just touching on where you fill in the gaps. I remember when I was, I don't know, I think I was 16 or 17. I've got an older sister and she was a couple of years older, and a younger brother and a younger sister, and we were laying the irrigation pipes for one of the golf courses because there wasn't enough staff to do it. So Dad was driving the ute, and we were sitting on the irrigation pipe that was spinning in, and my brother was standing behind and laying it into the piping trench, and we were spinning around feeding it out to him, and definitely hadn't done that at uni either. I hadn't been to uni yet then, but yeah, and even I think the point of just the relationships, you know, it's not a family place at work, so you can't yell Dad across the office, can you come here and have a look at this, or something like that. There's kind of, it's hard to, you know, you've got to be, you know, kind of like in a work environment, but there's also that relationship that you have with them, and then again where you take it all home with you basically, and it doesn't really finish at the end of the day, and phone calls continue on till whenever and start early in the morning and that kind of thing as well, and it's all you talk about at dinners and breakfast or coffee or whatever you're doing too, which is great because it means that you know, there's a lot of ideas flowing about the business, but it's also can be quite draining, I think.
Does it ever go the other way and you're stepping on people's toes? So like you maybe interfering too much in their line of work? So maybe more so Penelope, you talked about your brothers and sisters and having, you know, roles and responsibilities. Does it ever go the other way?
As in they come in and...
No, maybe like, you know, those lines when you are blurring them and, you know, is it fully appreciative of the help, or does it ever go the other way in terms of, you know, you're interfering too much in what I'm doing, or you're micromanaging me, or any of those kind of scenarios popping up?
Yeah, and I think it's very hard for the parents to let go, because if they've developed it and it's their idea, and I think Georgia touched on it before, you're the visionary and you're the only one that really understands how everything should look. So people can work for you, but they really don't understand it completely 100% the way that you see it, and you put everything into it, and you know exactly at the end of the day how it's supposed to look. And I think it's really hard for them to pass that over to you, even though they can teach it to you and they guide you and they take you, you know, along the way 100%, for them to actually then step back and say, now it's your turn. I think they find that really difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. Should we put it out to the audience, Kim? Guys, I'm going to pass this mic around, so hopefully you've got some questions at the ready. Anybody with a question for us this evening? Yes. Thanks.
How do you stay balanced with all the ideas that's running around in your head with the business and working with your family, and also having a personal life as well?
Is that for both of us?
Yeah.
It's not easy, and we like balance, as Georgia mentioned before. So I think just trying to kind of exercise in the morning, I think is quite a good one too, and before you start your day, and definitely have time to yourself as well, so you can remove yourself from the family business and have time to recharge. I find that really important for me as well, and then getting out and doing things with friends and coming to Melbourne, because I am based in Tasmania. And getting away from it, and, you know, kind of still doing a little bit of work here, or I suppose because we're in hospitality, you can visit restaurants and all that kind of thing, so you can see what's happening in Melbourne and take the best of it back and hopefully help to improve. But yeah, definitely finding time to do things for yourself and recharge yourself is really important.
I want to unpack that. What's going on at the moment? What have you got, like an area of the business that you're wanting to... so you're in a family business?
With my family.
Okay.
I'm a single mother of two, studying, and I have a lot of, I'm in the stage where I've got so many things going on in my mind, like lots of good visions,
Awesome.
lots of ideas, but it's also like getting a little bit like distracted with what's happening at home, and, you know, trying to make sure that my assignments are due on time, and then also trying to stay on top of my mental health, exercising and all that. There's so much time in the day that I've got, and I'm struggling with trying to get to a routine
Yeah.
Right? But I haven't figured it out yet.
So the uni component there, like you've definitely got a lot on, and having 2 young children, being a single mum and having uni, and you're going to start. Has the business started?
No, but it's just it's up in the air at the moment.
Okay. So really good. Like the idea phase in the early days is so exciting, and it's really important to like write all that stuff down and bounce it off people. Like start pitching your stuff. So what's the business you're thinking?
It's a food business, but it's more of a social enterprise in terms of giving back to the community.
Okay. And are you going to have a physical retail, or is it going to be a distribution?
Physical.
Okay, awesome. Well, start. I always like pitching things to people, and when they give me like this really funny face, then I obviously need to like slightly change it. But just start getting it out there, and then you'll find somebody that's actually got experience in that space, and you'll be able to learn a little bit more. And so the deeper you get into the business, the clearer it will be what your point of difference is going to be, how you're going to, like, if you need to raise money or whatever it is, and really start to focus in on it. And then you can say, okay, my kids are 2 and 4. I'm going to launch this business at this point when 2-year-old is happy in daycare and I've freed up some time and I've finished my uni, or do you know what I mean? Like you can really start to put some tangible time around what the execution is in the business. Side note, I'm on the second bite board. Yeah, so like happy to give you like any contacts or downloads or whatever you need, any hands there. It could be like a fun little collaboration thing as well.
Yeah. Actually, I volunteer at a community kitchen and Second Bite is a supply for the community.
Ah, which one?
It's called Penelopes Kitchen and Tutney.
Ah, fantastic. That's so good.
Yeah.
Cool.
I didn't know that you had anything to do with Second Bite until I read about you today. So.
Yeah, no, I've been on that for a few years, and it's such a cool organisation, and I love social enterprises. It's just got to have a balance with the commercial side and your like cooking.
Yeah, cool.
Pun intended.
Thank you for sharing your experiences. It means a lot. So any other questions for us from the audience?
I've got a question for Penny, but Georgie, you can answer it too a bit. Penny, one of the things you said was that in family businesses, it's a bit hard to switch off, where it's a bit all-consuming and all-encompassing, I think was the word you used. How do you manage that?
Switching off, I suppose I do it through exercise, really. So it's definitely time that I take to myself to kind of recharge and step away from everyone and everything for an hour or so every day, basically. And then I suppose just being really aware of where I'm sitting, mentally and how I'm feeling about things, whether I need to step away from the office for half an hour during the day or something like that as well, just taking time out to make sure I'm at my best, because if I'm kind of managing people and working with the family and you're on a lot of the time, you need to make sure that you're in a really good position, because you just no good to anybody else if you're not feeling 100% happy and confident in what you're doing too, I think.
I'll clarify the question a little bit. So for example, I might go home and see my mother at lunchtime, and as soon as I walk through the door, she'll say, Kim, we've got this contract you need to read, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to call this person, everything's an emergency. And then I'll sit there, it feels like a hurricane, and I'll say, it's really nice to see you. How about hello? Have you ever been in that situation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it happens all the time. I suppose you just kind of acknowledge everything that they're saying and then move through it at the speed that you can deal with it, I suppose. And just kind of fudge the truth a little bit on how things are sitting, that you've emailed them and you're waiting to hear back and you go and email them then or something like that. But yeah.
How about yourself, Georgia?
I don't know, the older I get, the less I know what is really important, and then I've learned to not care about a lot, where like 10 years ago I cared about lots. And I'm like this prioritizing queen now. And so things, things that other people do find important, I won't prioritise, and because that's my list, not theirs. And so sometimes I can't write back to text messages. Or I'm now really bad with my phone, and I don't think emails are work. You can be a slave to emails, like at one point I was getting like 400 or 500 emails a day, and before I sort of got the right things in place. And you could just sit there and be a slave and get no work done, but you're communicating with lots of people, and it's just not a thing. So, yeah. When you said I'm going to clarify the question, can you clarify again?
Do you ever feel like you just want your family there, and maybe the family business is just overriding everything else?
Oh, okay. But I don't know. I haven't solved that. Oh, you know what? I've started rowing with my dad, and that's actually quite fun because we talk about only rowing, and so it's not allowed to talk about. Well, it's not that we're not allowed to talk about it, but neither of us really want to. We don't want to bring that work into that space. So maybe it is about creating healthy boundaries. And sometimes other people in the family get pissed off if they're not that involved in the business, and you're talking about it at dinner as well. So unless everyone's in it, sometimes it can be a little disrespectful. But yeah, creating times where you talk about it, times that you don't, but hard to enforce.
I've got another question. So in leadership roles, what have you learned about yourself? Obviously you talk a little bit about not sweating the small stuff and understanding to prioritize. Is there anything else that you've learned throughout your leadership roles that's important?
What have I learnt today?
What does it take to be a good leader?
I think now it's like we've got this really interesting phase where you say we were driven by making our customers happy. Now we're finding it's flipped, and it's about making your staff happy, because industries, technologies, business models, they move so quickly. So now your greatest asset are your people, and you need them to be really switched on and give them free rein to come back to you with something that to challenge a fundamental bias in the company, basically, because that's what's going to keep that business growing and staying competitive in a really hard landscape. So for me, what's really interesting is how to keep staff engaged, making sure that what they're doing at the moment is on their trajectory, and be really realistic that you're only going to keep them for a couple of years. And if you are able to keep them for longer, then making sure that they're compensated appropriately and they're learning the right things. They might want to go and study more, or they might want to, if they're head of product, they might want to go sit in another area of the business or whatever, because there's a generation that's so hungry to grow, and it's not about your degree and then your title. It's about all the things you've done. And so that's why our universities are doing these micro courses. And so understanding how employment has changed is a really interesting topic for me today. And I mean this year, but I've noticed, and this is all like since the Industrial Revolution, we've made this like flip. So it was about the product, then it was about the customer, and like now I feel like it really is about our people, employees.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it being about the people, and it's amazing to see the shift in the way that employees think about the business compared to which generation they grew up in, and that you get so many of the younger ones coming through, particularly with kind of the hospitality element of waitressing or something like that while they're studying something else, and their ideals, or they'll walk in and they might do a day and they're like, that's not for me, whereas it was just never, like you'd never walk out of one day and say, that's not for me. You'd be like, I need the money and I've got to do this, and I've got to provide for a family or something like that, whereas they're very much about, I'm doing this and it needs to work for me as well. And so we need to make sure it does work for them, I think, too, to make sure that we keep them for the future because they're very important.
Awesome. Excellent. I think lady at the back's got a question for us.
Just out of curiosity, as both of you grew up in family business, at what point you knew that you actually want to continue to work in the family business? And also, did you ever think about not being a part of a family business? I'm just trying to, just curious about your thinking growing up. Do you always see yourself being a part of it? Yeah.
I think I always do in some element, but maybe not as completely hands-on kind of every day of the week that I am at the moment, I suppose. And I think fairly early on after university, I thought that I'd probably go back, but probably not for as long as I have. So I've been there for about 10 years now. And I thought that I'd go back and learn everything and be, the master of the universe and go on and do something else that was amazing. And I probably took a lot longer and I'm still learning at the moment. But yeah, I think I'll definitely be involved in some capacity into the future.
For me, the family business was like a launch pad for me, and I think very differently from Dad, and ideally we do another business together, but I don't know. I'm like quite an independent person, and so I knew that pretty early on that I was always going to go and do something of my own, and I kind of like isolating the mistakes just to be my mistakes. Like if I break the business and it falls over, then it's just mine, and it's like, oh well, no one else is responsible, or there's no repercussions for no one else has put money in it, no one else's jobs are in it, and so like I found the responsibility of the family business really full on, and so like I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do, which are riskier things, and so which I wanted to do, and I feel like in business you actually need to do those things now, and so I made that decision very very early on, but I will always support the family business and incredibly grateful for those foundations, and I mean I still speak to and do a lot in those areas outside of my business hours, but I've got my own career.
How important is it to make mistakes?
Well, I mean, I love making mistakes, and I'm a professional mistake maker, but I will break things and just relentlessly. So I should probably stop doing that, but it's really important to understand, like reframe mistake to, okay, that didn't work, why didn't it work, and just go up the chain from there. I mean, I love it when someone says no to buying something, or that's not going to work or whatever, and then getting in their heads as to why, and that's the whole premise of user experience. It's like, for me, it's not about
the learnings from the mistakes.
Yeah, and like, because if you're not getting them, you're not trying hard enough. You can't just cruise and be getting everything right, because it's impossible to be getting growth in my mind, and be getting everything right.
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest lessons come from making mistakes, so very important to try your own thing as well and see how it pans out. But
not to be afraid, guys. So any other questions from the audience? Yeah, awesome.
So we always talk about the hardest moments in business, but what was your most rewarding moment?
I think it's when we kind of pull off something that we had a really short lead time for, and it was actually an event that we put together, and we did it in about 6 weeks, and it was just really successful and had really positive feedback, and the way that we could celebrate it together as a family was really rewarding, and it kind of, that feeling that you get of success and being able to share it was something that encourages you to keep trying to do that and get that feeling again.
For me, 3 times that have come to me just now. First one was selling my wine glasses back to Laneway New Music Festival the 18 months later or a year later or whatever it was. And they're like, oh my God, you actually were stupid enough to do that. We will have 10 pallets. And I'm like, great. So that was a really good one because that was like n=1 that's going to work. And then I had, this was like 4 years into the business, and I was in Seoul at the time, and I had some friends in the area, and they were in China. I'm flying back to Melbourne, and they're like, oh, maybe we'll pop in and see you in Seoul. And I'm like, yeah, we're doing this event, and you can come along to the event. I've got to do some business stuff, but we can have drinks and catch up afterwards. And so they came over, and these were friends from Boston, and they'd sort of been following the business a little bit, and then they came, and they're like, this business is fucking big now, and they were like, their like view of what was happening in Korea. I had a check-in for me, and I was like, it is. This business is going well. And I needed someone else from the other side of the world to be like, hey, this is quite good, for me to actually realise it, rather than just being like rabbit down a hole, just getting things done. So that was like I have a vivid memory of that, and I'm like, hey, I made this. Like, I have a production line that did that, and they made it all the way to Korea. And then the last one is selling the business was really it was like therapeutic and satisfying to like just have an end date. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're coming towards the end, guys. So best to speak up now if you do have any questions. But I'm going to put this to Kim as well. Have you got any questions to wrap us up, Kim?
For all the people out there in the audience and watching who are in a family business or thinking about entering a family business, what is that one piece of learning that you would impart?
Have you got one? Do you want me to? There you go. Family businesses are such a special thing, and not everyone can have a family business because not all families get along, and you don't need to communicate in a family business because there's trust and you know what you need to do. You communicate in other ways, and so it is such an amazing, special thing, and don't take it for granted, but bring all of your different sort of loves and skill sets into the business to contribute to make it grow, rather than just conforming to whatever a family member sort of locked and loaded and intended on the business. So make sure you bring your diversity and your new generation ideas into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think playing to your strengths is really important, and it's not something that everybody has the opportunity to do, and it's so rewarding. And if you have the ability to be involved with a family member, I think that, go for it. It's great.
Awesome. So guys, we're going to leave it there. So thank you for attending the We Teach Me Masters series. Can we have another round of applause for our guest speakers this evening? Thank you very much, Penelope and Georgia.